So I will be talking about next steps for Drupal Canvas. I'm curious how many of you have already tried out Drupal Canvas, formerly called as Experience Builder. Few hands, maybe 1/5 of the group. I have some demos in the presentation, but I don't have as many demos as what I've had in my previous talks because of the focus is a little bit more on what's coming up in future. So hopefully you get a little bit of a sense on what we have today. But primarily on what you can expect from sort of 2026 and going forward. I'm lauriii. I'm a senior product manager at Acquia, and I'm leading the Drupal Canvas initiative. I'm also a product manager for a new product that Acquia is building called Acquia Source, and I've been part of the Drupal community for 15 years. Luckily I have some space here. Maybe next time I'll update my bio to include that I'm a DrupalCon NAR 2025 treasure hunt winner. Seems like a great addition to the bio. So just to set a context on what I will be talking about today, Dries set the vision in his Drupal Starship keynote a few years ago that Drupal CMS wants to be the gold standard for no-code website building in future. So we've been thinking about what does it actually mean to, be the gold standard. Like, essentially, how I think about a gold standard is that when someone thinks about building a website, they would think that Drupal is the best choice for them to use for that. And one key part of us getting there was the introduction of the Experience Builder initiative, which we believe was one of the most important initiatives that we could be taking on to get on to that vision. So the mission for the Drupal Canvas initiative, or Experience Builder initiative, what it was formerly called, is to make it easier and faster to build sites. And that is the context of this talk, is that Drupal Canvas might be doing something today, but how I'm thinking about Drupal Canvas is much broader than what it does today. It is really, okay, what can we do, what improvements can we make to Drupal to make it easier and faster to build sites? So you can see that it's not a very constrained view that I have on what it is that we are talking about here. It's a lot of things that are not necessarily specific to Drupal Canvas in any way because of, they all still impact this mission that we have. So that's to set the context of why you can hear a lot of things that are not very specific to what we have in Drupal Canvas today. So here's the timeline, how everything started. So we started in 2023, and now in November 2025, we have a release candidate of Drupal Canvas. So it's been a long way, a lot of steps along the way to get here. A lot has changed since we started, so it's sort of a time to re-evaluate, what we should be doing going forward. Like that's what we originally thought we should do, actually match what we still think we should do. Especially around AI, there's been like major transformation since we started on Drupal Canvas in 2023. Basically, it was hardly part of the vision for this project at all back then, and now in 2025, it's very hard to ignore completely the fact that AI is transforming the way we build websites. And how I'm thinking about sort of next phase of Drupal Canvas is the question, like, what sets us apart in this era of AI, where AI is transforming a lot of the ways in how we work with a building web, but also other things. So I'm going to present you sort of 3 strategic pillars that we should focus on. And then I will present some ideas on what I think we should do to get there, to actually sort of fulfill that strategic pillar. But I'm open to feedback from you all. Like if you think that, first, if the strategic pillars that we have, if they're not right, if you don't actually think that those pillars are the right ones, that's great to provide feedback on the high-level strategic vision that we have. Then the second part is that if you think that are the things that we believe actually help fulfill that pillar, if they are the right ones, that's also where we can get feedback from all of you. Because we are now at this point of, you can see that there's a lot of items in here that are under discovery, because of you're now just about to get a 1.0 release, and then essentially moving on to the next phase of this project. All right, so this first pillar that I want to talk about which you probably can expect based on what the mission is and what we've been talking in keynotes and other presentations with Dries and others. We have to enable building ambitious digital experiences really fast. And the expectation has changed from what it was 3 years ago, where 3 years ago it was expected that it can still take, months or weeks. It needs to be easy, but, there's an expectation that it can still take some time. But I believe that that's something that in sort of the era of AI is about to change. We're not quite there yet. I don't think the tools fully exist for this today, but it is definitely easy to see that that's the direction that we're going to. I would say probably one of the first areas that is going to be disrupted is the front-end development, especially front-end design phase of the development, because of if you have a designer building a Figma and then trying to import that into front-end is something that is sort of a fairly standardized process in a way to do. So I believe that that's one of the processes that will be disrupted first. Here's just a very quick demo of me building a website with Lovable. You've probably used one of these tools, but it's really, the design isn't the best. I'm not really even trying to build something really impressive. It's just, if you imagine what it even took to get to something of this quality back in the day, it's mind-blowing that in 2 minutes, you can essentially have a prototype that you can now then iterate on and improve the design on. So it's clear that the direction is that things need to move faster. And that's actually what we heard in the keynote as well, that even a Sharp, their organization expects that, hey, we need to be able to move faster given the advancements in AI. I don't think this is specific. Not everything that we need to do to make it fast to build sites has to actually do with AI. There's other things we have to do than that. But it's one part of it. So there's actually 3 things that I think we should focus on to enable speed. The first one is implementing a design system mindset and fully implementing design systems in Drupal as a concept that we support. So I believe that the process going forward will be where we essentially build something with AI, then we have to understand and refine that, what was generated by AI, and then we review and publish it. And the review might include someone else reviewing your work. And what's key here, and where Drupal Canvas plays a role, and where Drupal plays a role, is that, okay, we have the AI building something for you. We have to provide the right type of structure, the right type of tools that help humans then understand what the AI actually did. And we have to provide the right types of tools that we as humans can then tweak and actually get it to the 100% solution. So if what the AI produced is not understandable by humans, I don't think it has much of a value because of, you can't actually get it to the 100% production quality solution. And then finally, we need to have the tools to review and publish, which means collaboration amongst humans. So it could be things like being able to export your code into GitHub so that you can have someone actually review and confirm what is in there. And then you have to be able to iterate on it so that when humans actually tweak the code, you need to be able to build on top of that still with AI so that it's not like a one-time all process where you start with AI and then tweak and then publish. You have to be able to go back to the AI step. So Canvas already takes huge steps towards implementing design systems. We started by introducing the concept of components in Drupal Canvas. How this is different from Drupal before is that components are completely agnostic from the sort of use case of how you use them within the system. So you can use the components across the system for multiple use cases. So you can build a component like, let's say, a card, and you can use it to build a list, or you can use it to build a page, or you can use it to build a display for an entity. So that's something that Drupal didn't have before as a sort of first-class citizen that we would support in the system. So that will make it more efficient, regardless of who builds those components, but it makes it also easier to understand how all of it works, because it's all now isolated and separated nicely in these tinier chunks that are easy for humans to understand. Something to understand about components is that Drupal Canvas has the concept of components, but components can come from multiple different sources, including ones that you already know in Drupal, like blocks and layouts that Layout Builder uses. In Drupal Canvas, they all just become components. So some of the upcoming capabilities on this area are site templates and marketplace. That's enabled by having a design system mindset. So now, when you have a design system mindset, you can actually build multiple different kinds of site templates easily using the design system. I believe that this overall sort of value pillar of being able to build fast actually is one of the enablers for the site templates and marketplace, because in order for us to succeed on the mission that Dries has set for his marketplace, where you would have thousands of site templates, it needs to be fast for us to build those so that we can actually get to that scale. And then we will be also implementing other design system concepts, not only components, but things like design token APIs, so that you can in a structured way store your design tokens in the system. Style API, which allows you to build reusable styles within the platform, and icon libraries that allow you to expose your icons in there. And then finally, something that I know a lot of you have been asking for is slot restrictions. So essentially being able to define within the slots that your components have what components can be placed in there. So a similar use case to what layout builder restrictions have. So this is actually something that is already in progress. There's a lot of work happening in most of these areas actually already. I would say actually all 5 of these areas are being worked on already. So you can expect that there's going to be some good progress on these coming in 2026. The second pillar of enabling speed is integrating AI with Canvas. And you may have seen some demos around this. I have a quick demo that I'm showing here where I'm actually using the Canvas AI to build a list. This site that I have here is essentially a tour company site where I just want to list all of the tours. I'm using the Drupal Canvas code components, which is essentially a UI that allows you to create components. That then allows us to essentially build some integrated AI capabilities in there, where essentially the AI has all of the context from your site that it needs. So if you imagine this use case of listing tours, for example, it needs to know what are the components that you have in the system, and it needs to know what is the content model of your site, so that you can actually pull the right fields in there. So I started by doing this manually, but then at a certain point I was like, I actually don't want to do this manually because it was just like a lot of mapping of the fields and all of that. So I then went to actually ask the AI. So AI actually took the component that I started with as the starting point, and then it started refining it based on that. And now you can see that I'm actually refining what the AI had provided because it didn't get quite to the 100% solution. And now you can see we have the timer over there. In 7 minutes, I was able to get to a somewhat working solution in here. And it's using the components that I have in the system, and it works. On the right side, you can see also I have a prop that we can use to change the heading label. I'm just double checking that the code is all good, that there isn't anything else in the code that I've changed because the AI had made changes in there, and we're done. So essentially, we built a list in 8 minutes from scratch. And I did this in one take, and I didn't practice at all. So in the sped up version of this, you can see a lot of mistakes that I made because I was just trying to figure it out. So I was talking a lot about the context that you get from Drupal to actually help these components to be built the right way with AI. Something else that we are working on to add to Drupal CMS is a context control center, which then actually allows your organization to add context about how you want content and components to be created within your site. So you can tell about your preferred voice and other preferences that you might have, and it will be used essentially then on all of the prompts that are being used within the Drupal Canvas or other AI tools in there. So that's going to make it the results that the AI provides even higher quality. It's a great example of something that is easy for us to do it here, but harder to do outside. And then this is a new area that we haven't talked a lot about, which is to enable external AI to work with Drupal Canvas. So this is the existing tools like Lovable that I used in the example, so that you can actually leverage from the improvements that are happening there as well. So you saw the demo that I used where I was using the in-browser demo. That's not necessarily the way that a lot of you are doing development today because this is something completely new. So I believe that Drupal Canvas actually needs to also support ways in which you can use your existing tools, like whether you're using Cursor, PHP Storm, or whatever. You should be able to continue to use those tools and actually use AI still to accelerate the development. So I believe that we actually need to make Drupal and Drupal Canvas the best CMS to work with when you're using AI as part of your workflow to work with. I believe that actually what we've done with Drupal Canvas, the way that we've built components and structured all of that, actually makes us a really good target for this. So this is not that hard of a problem for us to solve because of that. Here's an example of a site where I actually, without any of the tooling that we have, I used just Cursor, Figma, MCP without any additional tools that we provide. So there's basically no context whatsoever of the site or how components are being built. I simply gave it examples from an open source design system library that was built for Drupal, and said that, hey, build me this design, use this repository here as an example of how you can do it. And within, I would say, probably 4 or 5 hours, I had this full site built. And I built this for my DrupalCon Vienna demo, so I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I actually wanted to get something that looks really good. So that's why I sort of went all in. If you look at, we can actually see I have things like top destinations in here. I have something like more destinations, and I have some like pretty complex grids in here as well. This was all something I had in a Figma design, and I wanted to get pretty much one-to-one in the implementation what I had in the design. So I wanted to test what it actually takes. And it worked surprisingly well. So what we're going to do to improve this experience is build something like development starter kit for using AI with Drupal Canvas and Drupal CMS. And that essentially provides some MD files and other tools that allow the AI to work more efficiently with Drupal. Then you can use our existing AI tools that you're using, your IDE and everything, and you can just, the AI will essentially work within your code base. You can export it to Git, and then Drupal Canvas will use them, and you'll have your AI created website from there. So this is essentially how we can improve the experience of building with AI outside of the Drupal Canvas AI, which probably is something that will feel more familiar to people who are already accustomed to developing with Drupal. So that's the first value pillar, which is making it really fast to build digital experiences with Drupal CMS. The second pillar I have, which I believe is something that actually helps us differentiate over the Lavables and Replits of the world that are purely focused on AI, is enabling content creation and site creation at scale. And that's by enabling collaboration within here. So what that means, if you go back 15 years ago, I don't know how many of you have been using like Dreamweaver, for example, or FrontPage to create websites. At the time when it was introduced, it was a huge shift in the market. Everyone thought that, okay, hey, you don't need web designers anymore because, now your marketing people are just going to go to Dreamweaver and visually build all of your pages in there. Well, that introduced the problem, like when you have 1,000 pages, it's not that easy actually to maintain those 1,000 pages in Dreamweaver because you would have to go to each page from those 1,000 to actually update if you made a change to the menu, for example. So it wasn't quite as transformational as we thought it would be. Then came the CMS to the rescue. So I believe this value pillar is actually just making sure that the CMS capabilities that we already have really support us to get that differentiation against the AI players. So just really making sure that our CMS capabilities are in the best possible shape possible. And I believe there's 3 key aspects that we have to deliver to make that happen. First is providing a simple user experience. That's what enables scale. Second is content modeling capabilities. And third is the right governance capabilities. So let's look into the simple user experience, what I mean by that. So the whole point of the CMS is to enable your broader team to be able to essentially work on your site. Like, do you want your content marketers to be able to write the blog post in your site? You don't want the developer or some technical person in the team to be submitting those blog posts in your site. The whole point of the CMS is to enable those scenarios. And that's only possible if it's easy to use, if those people are actually willing to use the system. What's been interesting when I've been looking at RFPs, and I have some stats in here, but the message I wanted to give is just I've noticed in RFPs that it's actually getting more and more common that companies prioritize what is the experience of building with your site. And there's actually been some pretty sour losses that I've seen as well, where the experience hasn't been as good as it should be, and it's been one of the reasons why Drupal hasn't been selected. And I wanted to look into that. Like, is there something into that? Is there some data that actually backs that up? That is something that actually happens in the sort of broader market. And I actually found some pretty compelling arguments in those statistics that it is something that actually is happening at a large scale within the market, which is why I think that for Drupal to succeed in the CMS use case where you're trying to enable scale, it needs to have a really good experience, given that that's actually something that customers put a lot of emphasis on. And I think Drupal Canvas already positions us really well on that because we've invested heavily on UX when it comes to building Drupal Canvas. So the experience of using Drupal Canvas should feel familiar when you've used other website building tools, or even something like a PowerPoint. You hover over things, you click them, and you can just edit them, so you don't have to go through like multiple steps or multiple menus to access different kinds of things. To create content, you simply access your component library and drag content to the page. I believe that we have a good foundation for this. There's still some quirks, like we saw in the opening session, actually, I think that was in Elliot's presentation, where he ran into some of the issues where he was trying to access the manage library instead of the add menu. But it's actually interesting to think because that's actually it's a good thing that we're finding out those things, because it's showing that people actually are trying to use the UI intuitively without actually putting a lot of thought into using it. And when we run into those scenarios, we just have to learn from it and then essentially improve the experience from there. So, in order to identify what those challenges are, we are going to be conducting user research and refine the UX over time. So I believe that the foundation that we have is actually already right, or in the right tracks. In regards to this, it's just about finding those quirks, finding those small issues within the interface that are not intuitive to the user, and then we'll fix those things. For example, the manage library versus that library issue that I mentioned is something we are already looking into fixing. If you're interested in helping with us, if you have any UX designers as a colleague, or if you're a UX designer, just let us know. And this is an area where it is easy for us to sort of scale the efforts and have other people run user testing, if that's something you're interested in. The next aspect of enabling scale is content modeling. And that's probably something that you are pretty familiar with, something that we are all pretty familiar with. I'll show you how Canvas already enables content modeling capabilities today to exist. So on this site, we saw that I was using a tour. I was already creating the list with this. So this is actually the content type that I have. This is the form that I have. So essentially, when you're using these content modeling capabilities, you would be just essentially creating content using the content type, just like you're doing today with Drupal. I'm now entering Drupal Canvas again, and I'm going to create a content template for this. So I'll create a new template, and templates are essentially similar to what we have as displays today for Drupal. So it allows you to display content from your content type. We can see on top, there's actually a selection of the content that I have. So that's where you select what content are we using to preview the actual end result. So we're not generating testing content or anything like that. You actually have to create content from the content type to be able to use this. Now, you can essentially then place components on the page, and then select on that right-hand sidebar. Instead of filling in the fields manually, you select which fields you want to map those properties into. And we can see when we are navigating between the different content, the heading actually changed when we did that. And you can see that the library that we're using is the same library as we would be using for creating pages. So you can use the exact same components that you use for creating content. So you don't need to have a different set of components for this. So I'm just dragging some of these components to the page to create sort of this basic structure in place. You can see that I'm using slots in here heavily to create those nested structures. The heading, for example, in here, I'm just writing a static heading in here because that's the same across all of the pages, and then I'm selecting those individual fields to map into. The options that you are provided in each of the menus, we will only show options that are actually relevant for that particular property that you have. So if you have a text field, it will only show you options that you can map into a text field. If you have an image field, it would only show you image fields or media fields that you can attach to a image field in there. So it's very similar to the token system that Drupal has, but with the difference that in here we actually know what the type is, and we can tell you which of these options actually are going to work well for the use case. So what I just did was I essentially copy-pasted. So I used the copy-paste feature. You can just use Command-C and Command-V in the system, and essentially duplicated bunch of things in there. Now we've essentially mapped all of our fields to the right mappings. So that's how easy that you can create a content template. So of course, behind the scenes, there's a little bit of work that went into actually building those components in here, but you can see sort of the potential of how easy this can make the creation of content templates. All right, so some of the upcoming capabilities that help content modeling. So something that probably a lot of you are interested in is translations support. So I can say that that's something that I would say right now is still sort of under discovery, but it is something that we are very firmly committed to work on early 2026. So you can expect some news on that probably by Chicago. If you don't have translations available by then, at least we should be very close to getting them done so that we can actually tell when they're going to be available. After translations, we will focus on bringing in editing nodes inside Drupal Canvas. So what you saw in the demo was creating content templates. So that's the display of the nodes. Node editing in Canvas means actually editing the structured data that you have within Drupal Canvas. And what that enables is then finally the third feature, which is something we call exposed slots, which allows you to create hybrid content where you have some of your content types actually using fields and then some of the content using Drupal Canvas content. So let's imagine like a product page where you have a consistent display of your product at the top of the page. You want to show like the product name, maybe a product image, the price at the top, and then after that you want to tell the story about the product, which is in a very unstructured format. So now that content you actually then create using your components in Canvas. So when we allow you to edit nodes inside Canvas, we can actually provide a seamless experience where in a single page you will edit both Drupal Canvas content using the drag and drop interface, and you can enter fields, content for your fields on that right sidebar. So you don't have to navigate between the two experiences. The final pillar of the CMS basics is governance. Drupal CMS and Drupal Canvas provides sort of a basic governance models already today. So you may have seen the review workflow that I showed in one of the demos earlier. I didn't talk about it too much, so I'll show it here. So when you make changes, you see a preview of that immediately. All the changes that you do, they're auto-saved automatically. So I just did a refresh of the page now. We can see the draft is still there. And now, when you want, you can just publish your changes, and then they go to the actual published version of the page. We provide sort of a basic permission model for Drupal Canvas, so you can actually customize who can edit your code components, who can publish content, who can edit pages in there, and so on. I would say that this is a pretty standard Drupal permission model, but we've simplified it a little bit from the standard, because like in standard Drupal way, it's a very granular set of permissions, so we made it slightly less granular just so that we can provide a little bit simpler user experience within Drupal Canvas as a result. We might be adding some of those permissions back if we find use cases where they are needed. So far, we haven't had anyone actually express any need for those, so fingers crossed that we can actually keep it this way. The primary feature that we are missing and are planning to work on in future is adding custom content workflows. So you can see that what we have now is something we call the simple content workflows. Essentially, you have that one in review, one draft, in progress workspace where essentially all your changes go in there. You can decide who can actually publish them, so you can have one person actually working on the changes and then another person can only publish them, so you can set the permissions that way. But in this custom content workflows, you would then essentially be able to send that one workspace where you might have multiple changes in there through a content workflow where essentially it would be draft in the beginning and then you might mark those changes as a review, needs review state, and then someone else could move it from needs review to a published state from there. And then you could have essentially multiple workflows going on at the same time, so it's not just a one workspace in there. So this is something we are doing discovery on right now to define when and how we could deliver this one. All right, let's focus on the third pillar, which is an ecosystem of community modules for advanced use cases. So I assume that this is something we can all agree on, that probably Drupal's crown jewel is the community that has built and maintains 10,000 plus. It's way more if you include all versions of Drupal. This is actually 10,000 that are actively being maintained today, community modules. So it's a huge accomplishment actually to have a ecosystem like that. That's something that the failure to create a working community ecosystem has led companies like Nokia to fail, essentially with their mobile phone journey. That's something that actually many of the leaders of Nokia said that was the biggest issue to why Microsoft phones couldn't succeed, because they completely failed to get developers to build for their marketplace. So this is a huge success for us that we've been able to build an ecosystem where we actually have a lot of people building modules and we have people consuming those modules in their sites. So I would say that the hardest problem is already solved. Now it's more about how do we actually sort of get the most value out of this ecosystem so that we can actually be the number one, gold star of no-code building. And I think there's essentially two areas that we should focus on in here. The first one is to focus on perfecting the most valuable modules, so making sure that we really level up them and make sure that they are really solid. And then providing a consistent user experience across the whole experience, whether it is through the modules that Drupal core includes or whether it's community-provided modules. So let's focus on first what I think about perfecting the most valuable modules. So something that I've seen as a sort of challenge a little bit in our ecosystem is that we can see that the market, the broader sort of market space is moving towards integrated systems. Like we saw in Sharp's case earlier today, that they are using a very complex ecosystem where they have multiple systems that they then interconnect together. Something that we could improve on is actually making that much easier for customers to realize. This is something you can all implement today with Drupal. It's just that sometimes it's hard, it requires developers, and we can, at least in some cases where it's very common to integrate with a certain platform, we can make it easier. How I would see the ecosystem looking like sort of in its ideal state is where we have a Drupal core, which is then essentially built upon on Drupal CMS, and then we have some third-party integrations and some other advanced use cases in Contra. So how I see about Drupal core is that that's essentially the core framework that we provide. We are actually moving product-like features out from Drupal core because we don't want to maintain them as part of this core framework. So things like layout builder, others, like we are looking into like moving them out from Drupal core. Then we have the Drupal CMS, which I'm considering as sort of the baseline product. So that's what actually then realizes the CMS mission of Drupal, that you get like a fully built out CMS when you download it. Then you have third-party integrations. Some of them might have some foundations in Drupal CMS, some of them might be in Contrib. And then you have other advanced use cases that this doesn't make sense to have as part of Drupal CMS or Drupal core. Example could be like the group module. Like that's probably never going to be part of the Drupal CMS, but it's clearly something that's really powerful and valuable to have as part of Drupal. So then we have this something that I feel like we have today and put maybe too much focus on sometimes, implementing baseline functionality as community extensions. So what I mean by these baseline functionality as community extensions, this is things like maybe Path Auto that was not part of Drupal core, it was not part of a product, but it was part of our community ecosystem, and then it was something you would always essentially have to download. Of course now, Path Auto is part of Drupal CMS. There's other examples like Layout Builder, where even if you want to get the baseline version of Layout Builder, you actually have to download a ton of modules from the community ecosystem to get just a baseline product of Layout Builder. And this is actually where I think we should focus as a community to sort of consolidate and try to bring some of those extensions back into either Drupal core or Drupal CMS so that we have an easy experience as a whole for everyone to use, so that we have the baseline product in there. Not necessarily, I don't want to discourage people from working on those things. It's more of me encouraging a collaboration and a way where we adopt those things into Drupal CMS or Drupal core so that they're not, just in Contrib, so that we actually have a better baseline product. So that's sort of, I'm just encouraging a different way of approaching it. And the reason I think is this, users expect those capabilities often as part of the baseline product, so that's why they should be part of it. Oftentimes the challenge that I hear, the reason why I hear people, is that because we can't agree on what the solution should be. But well, now with Drupal CMS and Drupal core, we have a very well-defined framework and governance model, how we make decisions. We have product people who can help us guide what we think that the baseline experience should be. We should be able to agree what is the actual, like what do we think is the best experience that we can provide. Or what, and sometimes it's not about what is the best experience that we can provide. Sometimes it's agreeing what is a good enough experience. Like the reason why Path Auto, even though we've all agreed that Path Auto is the solution, the reason it's not in core is because we haven't been able to agree on whether it's a good enough solution, even though everyone has adopted it. So now that if we apply this product mindset to that, we can say that since we have adoption for Path Auto, it must be good enough. Maybe there's something we can improve, but it must be good enough since it's being utilized. So the question on this one is something that I don't think I have an answer to. It's a question probably to myself, but also if you have ideas, I encourage others to think about it. It's like, how do we guide the development so that we can unlock specific verticals? So how could we actually have a focus on where we would look at that next year we actually want to be really strong on enabling the healthcare market to utilize Drupal? Like what are the different modules and improvements that we would have to make us really successful there? Because that could help multiple agencies then succeed within that market. So how do we actually facilitate that as a community where we get multiple agencies and multiple different groups who are interested in a specific vertical, identify what the gaps are for that vertical, and then essentially prioritizing work? Because that would then, essentially that focus could help us unlock Drupal for new markets where Drupal is not popular today. So that's just something for us to think about, and if you have ideas, come talk to me, because I would love to hear your ideas. The second part here is we need to create a consistent UX with Canvas. So users expect consistency across the whole ecosystem. Like if you think about Apple, Shopify, like they have actual gates for what your extension must comply with in order for your extension to exist in the marketplaces. Same expectation from our users, even if you don't have the same gates in Drupal, the same expectation from users still exists. They expect to have the same experience across the whole product. This is a little bit of a mindset challenge we've had historically. So I just put a screenshot here of the node edit form, and if you imagine how you actually extend this page today, is probably by form alter, because that's really how you can inject things in there. And form alter isn't necessarily encouraging any type of UX pattern or consistency, because of you can do anything with it. And it's great that you have the freedom to tweak things if you need to, but also when we want to create that consistent user experience, having focus and having something that is a little bit more guided would actually be helpful in terms of creating a good user experience. So in Drupal Canvas, instead of providing sort of a free access to adding your own extensions anywhere, we've created this extensions panel where you can create extensions that have a bounding box where you can do then essentially whatever that you want. I don't think that this is the North Star experience. This is just an example where this is what we've started with, because this is sort of the easy way, it's almost a formal way, in a little bit more constrained way. This was just an example of Acquia Web Governance that we've implemented in here. If you think about this example, Acquia Web Governance, essentially fundamentally what it does, it evaluates your content, provides you feedback based on that. I believe that for this use case, the ideal user experience would be, and the ideal API would be some sort of validation API that we provide that allows you to, in a given place in the UI, where every extension that does validations would provide their feedback in. So now if you have Acquia Web Governance providing feedback, you might have a broken link checker module that is checking whether your content has broken links. Now both of those validators could then provide in a single interface that feedback on your content. So essentially what we are doing discovery on is identifying what those patterns are that exist within the ecosystem, and then providing some APIs that then allow build that consistency for different types of extensions. And then we can implement those in Drupal Canvas. This is interesting because this probably isn't actually that much development work in the end. Like, most of it might be pretty simple. It's actually just product work in terms of identifying what those patterns are and what we should implement. So if you're interested in getting into product management, this might be an interesting opportunity to contribute on sort of product management work. So this is something where a lot of you kind of get involved, because this involves your modules and work that you've done. So this is where we see a lot of opportunity for you to be involved. If you're interested in, come talk to me, and I'm happy to brainstorm the ideas on how you can make your module get to the next level. So I just want to reiterate what the three value pillars are. Enable building sites really fast, scale with CMS capabilities, and then finally build an ecosystem of modules for advanced use cases. I believe that those three pillars will differentiate Drupal against the CMS players as well as the AI players in the space. Something to remember is that we should not measure what we do by the modules or features that we've delivered. We should measure these things by customer adoption, not technical completion. An example of this is that probably, even if we delivered all of these features in here that I mentioned, we would not get any adoption in Japan, because I didn't mention Japanese localization in there. So we need to understand what those blockers are for gaining an actual adoption of our features. And I'm happy to actually mention that Japanese localization is something we are planning to, that Acquia is planning to accelerate in 2026 specifically. So we will be looking into both making sure that Drupal Canvas can be translated, and that we actually provide translations for Drupal Canvas. But this is something that we should use as a guiding principle. It's not specific to the localization in any sense. We should apply that mindset to everything. So finally, I wanted to provide a few pointers just quickly on how can I start using Drupal Canvas, just to give you something concrete around the next steps. So Drupal Canvas, we had a release candidate in October. We are aiming to have a 1.0 by the end of November. I believe you're still on track for that to happen. And then Drupal CMS 2.0 is to be released in early January. I think we're targeting Drupal's 25th birthday in January for that. Surprise, surprise. We like to release on birthdays. A great way to celebrate. Obviously, Drupal CMS is a great way if you're building a new site to get started. Many of you probably have existing sites that you're using. That's where I have a very high-level idea where you probably want to create a plan by trying out Drupal Canvas, then making sure that you have some components available in Drupal Canvas, and then essentially making sure that the modules or the different business requirements that you have, they can be met with Drupal Canvas, and then only after that you would think about migrating content, because already if you have implemented all the way up until 3, you can start developing Drupal Canvas. So we have a demo repository that is great for you to start testing Drupal Canvas. So I recommend using that if you just want to try out how the experience is. Obviously, Drupal CMS, once it's released, that's the best way just to start it. But Drupal CMS 2.0 is not out yet, so this is a better way with that. For the existing components, you may want to think about how you want to utilize your blocks or paragraphs in there. If you implement those as SDCs, that's probably the best way to build them, to get them inside a Drupal Canvas. Blocks, actually, you can already use within Drupal Canvas. In terms of modules, you may want to think about things like web form and CK editor that already actually work, but there's a lot more that you may have to evaluate, like CK editor, plugins, editorial tools, workflows, group module, all of those things. So you want to evaluate, do I need those things when I build Drupal Canvas content, and how do I actually get them to work in there if you need them. And then finally, the final step is if you have layer code or paragraphs content, those might be ones that you want to migrate. We have some work in progress to make it possible to migrate, but I actually think that this is the least important side of this because I recommend just gradually adopting Drupal Canvas for new content and content where it's the highest value, and then only later actually start thinking about the migration to Drupal Canvas. So I've provided a few pointers on how you can get involved. We do have a lot of other things that you can do as well. So marketing, even fixing issues in form of coding, design work, and so on, where we can use help. So you can come talk to me during the event, or you can join our Slack channels to join the team and help us. I believe that we're more or less out of time. So I don't think we have a ton of time for questions. I don't know if we have any burning questions. One burning question that we need to answer before we wrap up.
So how will the use of Canvas influence the role of theming that used to exist in Drupal?
The question is, how will the introduction of Drupal Canvas influence theming in Drupal? So I think the biggest change is the design system mindset. So SDCs essentially include your CSS, HTML, JavaScript inside the component. And of course, in the beginning, not everything that Drupal provides is compatible with single directory components. But eventually, as more things become compatible with single directory components, then actually theming becomes less and less relevant because it's more about building your right components and utilizing those components in the right context. Something I recommend already taking a look at today, if you're interested in going fully all in on the component-based theming in Drupal, is looking at UI Suite, because they provide a lot of tools today that allow you to utilize design system concepts with existing Drupal tools. So for example, you would be already able to use with UI Suite, for example, components to build views, or to use the existing managed display with components. And with UI Suite, you can pretty much get away from most of, if you use UI Suite and Drupal Canvas, you can pretty much get away from doing any Drupal theming, hardly at all. Because everything is just components. The great thing about components is just that that's not in any way tied into the markup that is provided by Drupal. You own all of the markup, and you can control everything, which makes it just so much easier then to work with. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming.